This episode is all about the 2025 Miami Ultraskate. I got to meet up with Landy Cook, who was kind enough to share his perspective on the 24-hour skate marathon. This was Landy's third time attending Ultraskate and first time participating in the paddle-only category. I recall speaking with him prior to the event where he told me he was going to take it easy. And I suppose skating over 200 miles is easy for Landy because that's precisely what he did. We go over the things that made this year's event unique and dive a little bit into what got Landy to attend these silly events in the first place. He is a great resource, especially when it comes to pumping, as he was 99% pumped for several years before deciding he would give the whole pushing thing a try. We also talk a little bit about what being a newcomer in the scene felt like and how being around a group of like-minded individuals can make some of the most introverted people come out of their shell. Thanks for listening, and let's get on with the interview. Hello and welcome to the Skating in Circles podcast. I'm here today with Landy Cook. Landy, how's it going?
It's going great, Max. How are you?
I'm doing well. We were just talking about how it's warming up. It's about a month after Ultraskate. Late March usually kind of throws us for a loop, especially on the East Coast. You never know when the snow is just going to come back, but past few days have been pretty nice, right?
Yeah, no complaints here. I'd like it a little bit warmer, but it's certainly warmer than it was a month ago. And we've had a couple of really nice days here and there. So I think looking forward to just more warmth and a little less wind.
Yeah. We had like 2 feet of snow on the ground a month ago, and it's all gone. So that's great.
It would be very unusual for us to get snow from here on out.
So where exactly are you, so people know?
I'm on the eastern shore of Maryland, in a town called Easton, which is really close to the Chesapeake Bay. We have some waterfront on the bay, but it's really minimal. But it's a very cute, historic town, and I've lived here about 21 years or so.
Oh, wow.
But I'm a native Marylander before that, so it's sort of, I think I'm stuck here now.
Yeah. Cool. You guys have a lot of good trails around there, right? I see on your videos.
Yeah, they're not a lot of trails, but the ones we have are excellent. So the pavement tends to be good. They're pretty flat. The Eastern Shore is not known for hills. So that, flat and not terribly trafficked. And there are enough of them to make things interesting. So I think we're pretty lucky here as far as riding opportunities.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I want to get down there. We actually talked a little bit about maybe doing like a Virginia camping trip.
Yeah,
right.
I think it's going to happen.
Which is kind of in your neck of the woods. Yeah, so stay tuned for that. If anyone's interested, feel free to hit either of us up. We're trying to get a little group together, right? Maybe it's more of a self-supported thing. It's not like an event, but...
Yeah, I think the lower key, the better, especially if we're sort of doing it for the first year. But I think it lends itself to just, low key exploring and having a good time. And I think this is the year we're going to make it.
Yeah, we tried last year, but there's always a lot going on in everyone's life. Yeah. But it's looking like it should happen. So
yeah, absolutely. And Earl wrote it, not last year, maybe the year before. So he's the one that sort of got me interested in checking it out. And I bet we could get him to go again. Yeah,
I would love to get Earl down, maybe some of the other Philadelphia skaters, maybe even people from New Jersey or New York even.
Yeah, I think it's a good regional destination, something that's drivable and accessible to a fair number of skaters.
Question I got to ask you. You've probably heard it before on the show. What motivates you?
I would say family motivates me. I, as a husband and a father, that's always sort of, family is central to, everything I do. So I try to show my kids that you can be a full grown up and still do fun things. And
yeah.
Yourself athletically. I don't know if any of that has rubbed off on them yet, but hopefully they see me doing things that are not necessarily conventional for someone my age. So yeah, family. And then the other thing I would add is I'm drawn to very small adventures, so they're like big A adventures, like hiking the Appalachian Trail or climbing Mount Everest or doing these big grand things. But the reality is most of us are pretty busy, and have full lives. And it can be, if you're kind of waiting for the big adventure, you could never do anything. So I'm
Right.
really interested in kind of doing creative small A adventures near to home, things you could kind of do in a weekend or a day that are maybe offbeat, but kind of interesting. And so I've done a little bit of that in the past, and I'm always thinking like, what's the next thing like that I could do and kind of crank out in a weekend and then feel like I accomplished something that was kind of cool.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you don't need to like. There's this like extremism associated with like some of these things, like hiking or endurance sports, right? Where like I'm gonna hike the whole Appalachian Trail, and like huge undertaking, right? It takes months to do, and some people are like more into that, right? And like immersing
Yeah.
themselves, but like there's something to be said about managing the balance of like, all right, I'm gonna do it this weekend, then I'm gonna go back to my day to day life, and then find my next little thing, and like I think that's like a skill a little bit to, or like a discipline, right? To like not let yourself get too immersed to the point where it like takes over your life, right?
Yeah, but and that can be really cool. And I'm jealous of people that have a passion that they follow through on, where they sort of stop everything they're doing and they just go and do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And and yet, like I've never been able to do that, but we can experience that through them,
Yeah.
and so I think it's like I went through a phase where I was really interested in hiking the Appalachian Trail, and I would watch YouTube videos of people hiking the trail, but I wasn't hiking myself. So eventually I did like a little section hike in the Maryland Trail, and that was really fun. And so, I took the adventures of other people that inspired me, but I didn't feel like I had to do the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the way that I like to get my adventures. And it may be, I have a bucket list of like big ticket adventures, but I'm not going to be disappointed if I don't ever get to all those things.
Yeah. Would you ever hike Mount Everest?
No, no interest. I don't tolerate the cold, and just the crowds, like everything about that screams to me, stay far away. But again, I'm impressed people would ever do it or could do it or want to do it. But that's not the sort of thing I'm drawn to.
The crowds are crazy. I've I've
Yeah.
I've watched a few videos as well, like kind of the same way you were saying, like something I never do, but I'm interested to learn about it, right? Like hiking Mount Everest, and people just die waiting in line, right? Like it's
Fascinating. Yeah. What a
so scary.
senseless thing, but also, maybe it's beautiful if someone that's their passion and they've only ever wanted to do that. But it seems, I don't know, that's not how I want to get my adventure fix.
Yeah, that's intense. You mentioned you have family of kids. How do your kids feel about your skateboarding?
I don't know. Perhaps indifferent. I think
Cool.
sometimes they think it's a little cool. Maybe one of their friends might see one of my videos and like say, "Oh, your dad skateboards. That's cool." And that's about the extent of it.
Right. Yeah.
None of them skate. None of them do any uh, endurance sport. They all, played various sports in high school. I think they probably think it's interesting, and that's about it.
Yeah. No, that's all you can really ask for, right? Like something about like how they're like just out of high school. You're saying like
The youngest is turning 19, and then my daughter's 21, and the oldest is turning 23. They're all turning odd years this
yeah,
year.
yeah. That's they're still like young, right? Like
Oh yeah,
really
lots of time.
young.
I wasn't doing anything interesting in an athletic sense at that age, so they've got lots of time.
They're gonna get one day. They're gonna be like, Dad, you skated on 200 miles in a day. Like what? Like,
Yeah, I don't know.
like
And we can talk about that related to Ultraskate, but no one really understands what like a reasonable distance is to skate for 24 hours.
Yeah.
I find like the average person, you could say I skated 10 miles or I skated 1,000 miles.
Yeah. It's hard. It's one of those things that's like hard to compare to. Like, if anyone asks, them, like it's kind of in between cycling and running, but where in between is like hard to say.
Yeah.
But 24 hours is also like not a time people usually associate it with biking or running for, right? So like, you're right. It's hard to explain what a good, like what a lot of miles is in 24 hours, even though 100 miles is a lot to skate. It doesn't really matter how long it takes you.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So when was your first time skateboarding?
I was an older convert to skateboarding. I was 36, maybe 37. It was in 2008. I had hurt my knee running, and I'd never been on any kind of skateboard before that. But I tore my meniscus and needed surgery, and I couldn't run anymore. And I was sort of addicted to running at the time. And somehow I stumbled across James Peters' Pave Wave website, and there was an article about Barefoot Ted, who at the time I think had the world record for
that's right
skate. And he was all pump, or like 99% pump, with his barefoot shoes. Something about that just kind of clicked. I'd never tried barefoot shoes. I've never been on a skateboard, but I thought, this looks cool and this is different and this won't pound my knees. And so I think I ordered a subsonic from Scott Moore. And
oh wow, those are the early days. Those are like,
yeah, that was the start of it. And so I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never been on a skateboard before that. I couldn't do any tricks on a street deck, and I went straight to pumping. Like skipped pushing. I had a high deck, with big zig wheels, and I just tried to pump, and I had just figured it out by trial and error and puttered along at 5 miles an hour and just was very uncoordinated. And eventually it kind of clicked enough that I could go a little faster. And then I decided we did a virtual Ultraskate with a couple of friends in Maryland.
oh, really? When was that?
2009, I think, in about
Wow.
16 years ago. And we had no idea what we were doing. We just picked an industrial park and started in the evening of all times because we got off work, and that seemed like a good idea. So we were riding around with headlamps, and we were out on a country road just doing out and backs because the pavement was pretty nice there. But, it was dark, it was cold, and we were pretty slow. And we eventually kind of called it quits around, 3 in the morning and took a nap, and then started up the next morning on the local bike path, which is only about 2 miles, or it was at the time. So just back and forth, lots of road crossings. And then we got bored of that. So we got in the car and drove up to another bike trail, like 30 minutes away. So it was a lot of driving, a lot of sleeping.
Wow, that's cool.
We got 100 miles in somehow, and it was still really fun. But that was my only Ultraskate experience until very recently. So I did it a little bit, and then I barely skated for about 10 years or so after that. But that was the start of it.
That sounds like something that would have happened back then, where people just kind of like heard about Ultraskate and were like, "Oh, let's just do our own right here."
Yeah,
and
I think a few other people all over the world did the same sort of thing. And then I got out of it. So I don't know what happened in the years after that. Maybe it grew a little bit. But it turns out riding in the cold, in the dark, with only a handful of people gets kind of old after. It was kind of miserable in the middle of the night, but still fun. Type 2 fun. It was fun after the fact.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like type 2 fun. Especially when, maybe like there's less knowledge about like ultra skates and stuff, and like even ultra running back then was definitely a thing.
Yeah.
But there's less knowledge, less gear, less all that stuff. So like the fact that you guys even went out is pretty
certainly
cool.
Less gear, less precise gear. We were skating on Bennett trucks, and they were super wedged and bushings that were cut and then stacked on one another. And there was a lot of info on that paved wave site, and so you could learn from other people, but it was still, it felt, kind of like a lot of experimenting, and it wasn't quite easy to dial in, especially for a new rider. And
Yeah.
so I think it's come a long way, being accessible to new riders, hopefully.
And you were pumping the whole time, mostly?
Yeah, I didn't know how to push. I didn't learn how to push until about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago,
Oh,
4 years.
really?
Yeah, because I did that initial, pumping, on a top mount deck, and then a long time went by. Life gets busy, and I didn't have time, or felt like I didn't have time to ride. And then I got into surf skates briefly. I say get into. I was never good at that, but that sort of re-sparked my interest in distance skating again, because it was fun. It was a new thing. But that was, I think, in 2017 or so, and by then we had precision trucks, and so I bought some Don't Trip, Slalom and just felt like this is so much easier than fiddling with the stacked, Bennett cut bushings. And
Right, for sure.
so it kind of rekindled my interest in riding. And then I didn't start pushing until even after that. Yeah, it's been just a few years.
How do you not push? Do you just like start in a pump, or do you like
I just go right to pump. I do like one push, two push, pump. I didn't know any better. I didn't know. I hadn't tried a drop. I guess I tried a drop deck way back when I had it, one of the, very early G-Bomb Cambiars. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Oh, yeah, it sounds familiar.
Egg shaped deck with big metal brackets that had like quick release, like you'd find on a bike wheel. And so that was a little bit dropped, but very bouncy. And I never got good at pushing that. So I just pumped that too, very awkwardly. So probably, in retrospect, I don't know if it was good learning to pump instead of learning to push, but that's how I did it.
No, I think, to each their own, right? Like,
Yeah.
do whatever makes you feel comfortable. I think that's really cool. I don't think I've ever heard of that before, to be honest. Like, pump for like 10 years, and then all of a sudden, I figure I'll try the whole push thing. And
That's sort of where I landed. I felt like if I'm going to be a longboarder, I should probably learn how to push. But it still feels not easy to me. I feel like I'm bow-legged, and I feel real awkward. So it's something I've worked at a lot, and I can push switch, and I feel real comfortable, at least going along like on level ground. Switch, I get a little nervous when I approach like an intersection and things get a little busier.
oh yeah. But do you like ride switch when you push switch?
Yeah,
like, you like
I can't push Mongo. My brain can't deal with this. I think it's like the slight weight shift from front to back, and I just don't like it. So I just switch regular. I often just sort of jump switch, and it works for me, I guess, until it doesn't, and I fall off. But yeah.
No, I think there's value to that. I do the same thing, and like, there's definitely points if I'm going like my absolute fastest, I'm like, oh, I can't really turn my whole body, and I have to do a little bit of Mongo.
Yeah.
But with a longboard like Mongo, it can be like right in the middle of the board rather than all the way in the back. And like, even that though, it can be hard. So it's tricky. I think though, for like a chill ride, it's best to completely switch. Learn how to pump switch even.
Yeah, that's elusive to me, but that's what I'm always. I always have good intentions that I'm going to work on switch pumping, and then reality hits, and I feel like I can be so much more coordinated on the other side. But I do make a point somewhere. I heard this trick one trick that I thought was really helpful for pushing was to push uphill when you're practicing.
Yeah.
You have so much more control of the board. It's not going to get away from you. And it was confidence inspiring. So I think that's really important. And the other thing that I heard was to always start on your switch foot pushing, because if you can't ride switch when you're going slow and just starting out, how on earth are you going to be able to ride when it's dicey? And that stuck with me. And I'd recommend that to anyone that wants to get better at switch pushing.
Wow, those are actually like two really good ones. The push uphill is a great one that I tell people too, but I didn't think about the other one where it's like when you start your ride, start it switch so that you kind of build acceleration to a point
Yeah.
where you're uncomfortable, and then you keep pushing that where that level is of being uncomfortable. I think that's a great point.
And it doesn't quite become second nature, but it starts feeling less strange, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just start every ride on the opposite foot, you start to fool yourself a little bit. Hey, this is normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the 2025 Miami Ultraskate recap episode. So let's talk a little bit about how it went, how the day went for each of us, and maybe some of the cool things that happened. Since on the subject we're on, like you didn't push at all because you were in the paddle category, correct?
That's
That's
correct.
right. Yeah. So you went back to your roots, straight pump, and with a little bit of paddle. How was that?
It was different. There are parts I really liked. It was very sparing of the leg muscles. You know, I felt like afterwards, I felt really fresh, you know, in my legs overall. Like, I mean, things still hurt. Don't get me wrong. And my arms held up pretty well. I tried to use my core mainly. You know, I don't. I have a more powerful paddle stroke, but I tried to ride real relaxed with my arms and shoulders because I already had a shoulder issue going into the race. So just take it easy and paddle a lot. I felt like this year it was a lot more pumpable than the previous. I've only done it 3 years, but the past 2 years I think were more typical wind patterns where you had the winds from the east, and they seemed to make it easy to pump through turn 4 and then on pit row. But then going on the backstretch, it was usually into a pretty strong headwind. And this year, it felt like we had a tailwind or a side tailwind, which made that backstretch a lot easier. And then the opposite of that on turn 4, it wasn't quite so fast, which I actually prefer. I'm not a real speed demon, and so I'm not one to tuck, and I didn't mind going slower in turn 4 this year. I don't know what your experience would.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was thinking. Like pretty much every other ultra skate I've been to, I mean, even including this one, there's always a moment where the wind is like hitting you really hard, like headwind, and it's
Yeah.
like, how am I going to skate through this? You know, and that only happened like twice on the pit row side, but on like you're saying the backstretch, it was so nice. It was just
Yeah.
like tailwind for days, really, and like that open space is just so much better for pumping through than what you get if it's the reverse, because like yeah, like you said, you get the downhill, which is cool. If you want to tuck, you save your legs, and then you can pump right into pit row and then pump past the pit, but that's usually where you're going to stop or like grab something or whatever, right? So like you're probably on average like slower on that side for that reason. So like you want your fast side to have the tailwind, I would think.
Yeah, it seemed to work out well. I felt like I saw more other people pumping this year, and maybe I was just sort of looking for it because that when you take away one of your main ways to propel yourself, you're more limited, and so all I could do was pump and paddle. So I'm always looking like, what are people doing alongside me? And I saw a lot more pumping in that back stretch, which was cool, I thought.
Yeah. Jared Ames, Hawawa, he was
Yeah.
pumping pretty much every time I saw him. He was just like grooving through, really, really rhythmic and like just dialed
He's
in.
got style. He makes it look so easy. I know it couldn't have been easy, like in the middle of the night, but he was just jamming, and
Yeah.
that was cool. That was one of the funnest things for me to witness.
Well, yeah, I think like between pumping and pushing, right? Like pushing's like this like impact kind of it's not like high impact or anything, but like
Yeah.
it's like you hit and then you propel yourself, right? Whereas with pumping, it's like that momentum is just like whoosh, 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 whoosh. It's definitely like if you have the wind at your back, so much less effort than having to push. Depending on how fast you want to go, right? Like it's probably a lot more efficient to pump a lot of the when it's like that much tailwind and
I think so. I don't quite know that we have any data to support any of that. A lot of it's subjective, but
definitely. Yeah.
but it feels to me like I can, when I really want to go fast and wind's not involved and it's flat, I think it's hard to beat pushing for efficiency. But there's this ground, maybe it's like 80% of the time I'm actually skating where maybe pumping is just as efficient. If it's not as efficient, it's muscle sparing, and if you're,
Yeah.
I think it's the stabilization leg. Like if your quad is firing all the time and you're able to give it a break from pushing by pumping, I think that can only be a good thing in the long run.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's probably more of that like transfer, because obviously if you're pumping the whole time, you're gonna wear down other muscles, and then
It's tiring too. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not necessarily having a good balance of the two probably makes for like a better experience overall. But
Maybe.
there's no way to avoid the pain.
The pain I felt this year was in my feet. I've never felt foot pain and then numbness like that before. I guess I just wasn't prepared for that. I've had uncomfortable feet in the years I pushed. I think maybe something about not mixing it up by putting your foot on the ground and sort of feeling something different than the board regularly. I think that takes a toll. At least it did for me. I mean, I'm curious. I haven't talked to enough other all paddle people to get their impression, but that did a number on my feet.
Yeah, like Andy was all paddle this year. I'd be curious to hear what he had to think. Like, did your feet fall asleep? Like
mine did.
Tingly?
Like totally numb, and to the point that I would feel like I had to get off the board. Like that was a limiting factor for me more than the aerobic endurance. But a couple times it started hurting. Like, and by the end, I mean, and of course, who knows? Everything hurts at the end, but they were really painful, and I'd have to just get off. I changed my shoes once. I don't know. And I had a deck with a really, with a like a foam EVA deck pad that you'd find on a water supboard, and probably mitigated some of the vibrations. But I'm not sure it matters what you have. No padding, lots of padding, thick shoes, minimalist shoes. I think at the end of the day, it's just jarring on your feet.
Yeah, like a lack of movement, but you have to keep them like kind of strong and like flexed almost at sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but that was my pain point physically, was the feet.
Yeah, my feet were hurting a lot too, and I did pretty much 95 more than that percent pushing, and my feet were completely thrashed at the end. Earl had like a fascia thing, like one of those like spiky little, it's like a half dome set on the floor, and you just kind of work your feet, and that was amazing. After I finally took a break at like 20 hours in or whatever, and that was like, it's really nice. It's just craving that the whole time.
It's funny how little things like that give you a break. Like you start to really look forward to some relief, with it's temporary.
Yeah. So yeah, you ended up with 204 miles?
202, I think.
202. And we had talked like beforehand. You told me you were planning on taking it really easy, not worried about your mileage, because you said, as you mentioned already, you had a shoulder injury, and like I think you said your ankle or something.
A hip.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't push it all, because my hip. I got a stress fracture in my foot before all that. Like this all happened kind of at the same time. But I think I was, in retrospect, just pushing really hard last summer, going for speed, and I got faster. But I think I just wasn't careful enough with my pushing when I was sprinting. And anyway, it caught up with me. So I was able to stand on the board, just not push. And then with my hip, I just thought it was better to paddle. So, yeah, so I had went in with pretty, like, I don't want to say low expectations, but I didn't want to put any pressure on myself to hit a certain mileage total. But, looking like you seem to be a model of consistency, right? I mean, you seem to get 200, if not every time. Like,
yeah, I missed it like 3 times out of the 10. So some years were definitely pretty ugly. But yeah.
But I feel like you're always quietly in the mix there doing your thing, and you just get it done. So I'm curious what your secret is to that consistency.
That's a good question. I went in kind of similar to you, not necessarily like low expectations, but I was just like, past couple years, I just had really bad nutrition. And one of the years I got like 110 miles, right? Which is still a lot of miles to skate, of course. But I was off the board for like 10 hours, just because stomach wasn't right and everything was off. this year I was like, I just got to figure out my nutrition. If I can get like 250, that would be amazing. But like, I don't care about the miles, right? Like, but
Yeah.
deep down, I do, and like, I need 200 in order to like feel okay, like about the whole trip.
You don't care about the miles unless it's under 200.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think that's mostly what motivates me. And like in the past years, it's always I've done things like stop at 120 and be like, all right, it's got 80 miles left, and then stop at 150. And like every time I take the break, though, it just gets harder and harder to like get back up. Never really feels good, and like it doesn't really like make you any better, like unless you have to stop, right? Which
Right.
I had like last year, 2024, I had to stop to like use the bathroom and stuff, and like that cost me like a solid 4 hours, 5 hours, but I still got the 200, right? But this past year, I was just like, I got to dial in my nutrition, and I'm just gonna go, and I don't want to stop because I know how hard that can be, but I will stop at 200, and that's eventually what I got to, right? But like, yeah, the nutrition was absolutely great. Like in the past, I used this gel. I think I've mentioned it before. The Spring Fuel. It was marketed at 45 grams of carbs. And I was having 2 of them, so I was like, "Oh, I got 90 carbs an hour." But it turns out it's more like 15. They like fucked. They totally screwed it up. And I was using those the past 2 years. So I was like, I'm not using those anymore. And I used the high carb mix, which is the same thing Lena used actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I did some rice and some potatoes. So like I really focused on the food part, and that I feel like was what got me to the 200 this time, because my pace was the slowest it's ever been, but I got there earlier than I have in other years because I just didn't stop. I think that's it, and like maybe the trick there is just like learning from all the past experiences, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And like most I've done was 257, and like there were a couple or six. There were a couple years where I'd go back and be like, all right, I got to do at least that. I gotta beat my personal best, and it's just like not always the best mentality, right? Because that can kind of mess with you and like to make you stop like way earlier than you could have otherwise. There've been years like I went to sleep just because I was tired, and I think that's not a good thing to do, right? If you want miles, like obviously if you have to stop, you have to stop.
I mean, it's a totally reasonable thing to do.
Yeah.
Not usually what you signed up for, in your heart of hearts, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's a maybe that's the curse of putting up 250 plus miles at a young age, like you've done. That you set this really impressive bar, and like it'd be great if you surpass that, but gosh, like that's incredible you even did that once, let alone feel like you have to better that. I don't know, that's a tough hurdle. I think if you make that your North Star, but I don't know, I think we're all sort of chasing just a little bit more at least.
Yeah, you always have to like think about it, right? Like
Yeah.
And you only get so many of them, right? Like it's one per year, and it's just one day. It's just like 24 hours an entire year. You have to maximize like the amount of miles you skate. It's kind of a weird thing to do to begin with, but it's a weird thing to like think about and approach, because sometimes, like we said, the weather was great this year. Sometimes it's just not. That completely throws you off.
Yeah, for sure.
Is the reason why you didn't beat your personal best or whatever. But yeah, like there's definitely a few things like I had like summed up a few things in my head beforehand, and I think like the main thing is that you can always go faster later. If you had the energy to go fast at the beginning, you can just do it later. With that, just take it easy for the first 8 hours. Like go like deliberately go slow, because you only have so much in the tank, and like going faster at the beginning, like over 8 hours, you go a mile per hour faster. It's only 8 miles after 8 hours, right? Like, but it could cost you like way more energy than.
That's a great point. I never thought of it in the math terms, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, mathematically speaking, right? Like, so it's all about just finding that pace that you're comfortable at, and then like, hour 16 comes by and you've got a ton in the tank. Like, put the pedal to the metal and like see how far you can go. You don't want to expend that energy early, because it's going to make the rest of your day really bad.
Wise words from a multi-time veteran. I always feel like I have a plan until the gun goes off, and then it's
Right.
you improvise. But I had planned to go out really slow, and then I think I had over tapered. I tapered pretty significantly, and so I had all this energy, and I went pretty hard for a couple hours. But I didn't expect to continue that pace. I just thought, well, it's as cool as it's going to be during the day. I feel great. I'm going to go hard for a couple hours and then slow it down. And I did. And I thought I have no regrets, but I probably burned a little bit more energy than I planned. Um, and then I felt, like you said, I felt comfortable slowing down during the day. I just wanted to survive the day. And I think you learn that from doing it a couple times. The one thing where I kind of would have done something differently is at least for me, I start slowing down in the middle of the night and I'm tired and the sleep deprivation catches up with me. And then like you don't feel well. And then your brain doesn't like do the math as well, or I got caught in this mindset. Well, if I'm going slow now, that's it. I'm going to have to go slow all the rest of the way because that's how I feel right in this instant. And I think it was seeing Jared just like grooving and it in the early morning hours. I said, I have more in me. Like I can go faster. And I started looking, doing the math. I was like, I'd all but given up on 200 miles. And I thought, well, I actually, it's mathematically possible. And I trained too hard to not try for it. And so and then I had a switch go off and I was able to finish strong. And I felt really good about that. But it was really close to not happening that way for me.
Right. Yeah. You remind me of something this guy Panta used to say, or does say. He's from France. He's been to Miami.
Yeah.
You know him?
I've seen him on Facebook.
Yeah. He's definitely a really great dude. And he said to me once on the track, no matter how good you feel, no matter how bad you feel, it's not going to last.
That's right.
So like I always think about that like all the time. Even when I feel good, I'm like, oh shit, it's not gonna last. Like, can't get too excited, so it kind of holds you back from like, you're like, oh, this is easy, like I feel fine. And then the moments where you feel absolutely terrible, you just think, oh well, it's not gonna last. Another thing I think is like it can't get any worse, even though it probably could, but like oh this is the worst it's gonna get. It's just gonna be like this for a while. Yeah, there's all these kind of mind tricks you play on yourself.
That's right. I think that's the hardest part of it, or the most interesting part of it to me. It's not the physical stuff, which is important, but that's not, I think, what keeps me coming back for more.
Mm-hmm. So were you at like 12 hours in and you were 100 miles? Were you like on pace for 200 the whole time, or?
Yeah, but in my head, like my plan is always to try to like bank a few miles. So to get, I don't know, 100 miles in 10 hours or something, and then have a little bit of time for breaks. Cause I end up taking more breaks as it goes along, even if I don't plan to. Like my thought is I'll sit down, my feet are killing me, I'll change my shoes. And then 20 minutes later, you're still sitting there. And I guess I got to get it. It doesn't get any easier the longer you sit there. So my breaks, if I look at like my lap times, I can see where it just kills you to take those long breaks. And I was on pace, and like Jake, I was riding with Jake a lot. He took a lot more breaks during the day. See, he's young but smart, and he trusted in his strength that he could ride more at night, which is absolutely true of all of us probably. But I felt like I had to get a certain number of miles during the day. And then as I saw myself slowing down, I started to get a little bit dejected that like, oh yeah, I could do 100 miles in 12 hours, but there's no way I can repeat that in the next 12 hours when of course I could repeat it. It's better temperature, the wind is lower, it's fun to ride at night if you can kind of get your mind in the right place a lot of the time. So anyway, there were some ups and downs, but it was fun because Jake was all positive. He's like, I'm getting 200 plus, and he had no doubt about it. So that kind of cool. Motivated me a little bit more.
Yeah, that's great when you have someone like that who's kind of like rolling at your pace or similar goals, right? And you just kind of, oh, if they're out there, I got to get out there, or
yeah. And he's a faster rider, so there's a little bit of the tortoise and the hare. He was going faster and then taking breaks, and I was sort of slow and plodding. And he won out in the end, but it was I made it more interesting towards the end.
Cool. Yeah, that's like me and my brother. Like he's usually going faster than me, but he took like an hour nap, this year, and I pulled ahead of him, and then sure enough, he came up like, he ended up like 50 more miles than me. But it's really fun to like develop those relationships, get each other to your goals. So you get done with 100 miles, right? And the feeling is always like, how do I do 100 more? Like the state you're in, it's late, you're tired, you've already skated 100 miles, so your legs are beat up, or whatever, your arms, whatever it is. What did the second half look like then? So like,
it's a good question. I guess I must break it down into smaller segments. If I did 100, I can get to 120, or like, let me do 10 miles in an hour and that sort of thing, with the goal that, if I hit 150, I'll be okay with that. Although I wouldn't have been, I would have done more, but that's all. I can only look like a little bit further along, right? But I don't know. I struggle a little bit with that, frankly, because often I just rely on my training to sort of carry me through physically, but I don't always think about the mental gymnastics you go through in the dark times.
Yeah, for sure. I find I don't like remember it either.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm struggling to think like, how did I do that?
Yeah.
I just remember, and sometimes I'll start looking at people in front of me or behind me, which I don't like to do too much of that, because I really feel like I'm there to get my own, goal. But sometimes it gives me like some sort of nudge to just keep going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it distracts me from the the minute to minute thought of like, how far am I going next?
Right.
Or sometimes I think, well, I'll ride, 10 more miles and then I get to take a break. And so you kind of treat yourself with a little
bonus, or like, I get my chocolate at this hour, like I got to make it there and then I'll decide, or whatever.
Yeah, right? I haven't figured out how to stomach food. But the other challenge with a paddle, especially with not push paddle, but you can't eat. Like,
it's not hands free.
Uses your hands. It's a quick gel squeeze and then shoving the trash in your back pocket, or drinking it, which I'm just not great at the liquid sugary drinks after a while. My body can't stand those. So I'm drinking water and trying to drink a gel, and then as I got further along, I would just have to stop, because I started craving that. I did a little better stomaching things than the previous 2 years, where I had a lot of nausea and vomiting. This year I didn't vomit at all, which I was really proud about.
Nice. Yeah, same. Honestly, I was like, I didn't even throw up this year. Like
that sounds like a small thing, but that was huge to me.
I think it's tremendous. Honestly, like the amount of stuff we put in our bodies to keep it all down and like rehydrate at the end, that is a task in itself, right? It's like an achievement on its own. Definitely something to be proud of. Something to remember, like about how, like what your nutrition was, and then to take that into the next one. I think that would really help. Like I did some rice and stuff, and that was really good for calming my stomach. I found, but I had my hands, right? So I could do that on the way.
I don't think I'm going to do all paddle again for a few reasons. But if I go back to paddle push, then I can kind of tuck the paddle under my arm and have a brief period of using my hands. So I'm going to try some real food, because I just intuitively I think that's what my body wants. I just haven't figured out how to incorporate that into the actual riding.
What kind of paddle do you use?
I use a handboard subskate. It's an adjustable paddle usually. Donnie from Handboards let me use one of the fixed length ones during the race, which is pretty cool, because it's lighter. The flex is really dialed in, whereas the adjustable one, there's just more pieces, so it's not quite as elegant. But I do like being able to adjust the length on the fly, because if it's really windy, you might want to shorten it a bit. Or if you're going uphill, you might want to shorten it. And if you're just whipping along with a tailwind, you might want it long. I don't do too many adjustments on the fly, but sometimes it's nice to have that option. So generally when I'm training, I have the adjustable one, and that's probably what I'll go back to long term.
Cool. I've been thinking about getting one just to have, because I don't have like I have one of like the What's Up paddles. Do you remember those? Do you ever see those?
No. Is it firm though? Like some of them are just rigid.
It's like it's pretty flexy. It's like a rattan piece
Oh,
of
okay.
rattan with a Kong at the end. And it's cool. Like I really like it, but I think I would like to try one of the handboards ones. That seems to be what most people use.
It's pretty dialed in. Like I can't find any fault with it. I've been really happy with it. And it has, a bit of flex, but it's not like limp noodle flex. It's kind of purposeful flex. But I think it's real important. I see sometimes people are using like a really rigid pole with no give. I think that would be really unpleasant after a while. Not as fun an experience, because part of the fun is like when you bend it a little bit and then let it whip you forward a bit.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot of fun. Like having a different method to propel yourself. Andy Andrews was saying, he wanted something different, so he went for the paddle. And I want to see what it's all about. It seems like a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. And even if you don't decide to race with it can be fun just kind of going for an easy ride, scenic ride, or piddling around town. It doesn't have to be like a really fast endurance-based ride. I find at my age, it spreads the load around a lot more muscle-wise. So it forces me to have a little more upper body strength than I would. It just feels more well-rounded to me than if I wasn't using my arms at all.
Yeah, so that's definitely part of the appeal for me as well, is getting that extra full body workout. Whereas like, I guess even just skating, pushing is like, it goes up your core, right? There's a lot to it, but with the paddle, it's pretty much everything at that point. Not not necessarily all parts of your leg or all parts of your upper body, but
but it gets the big muscle groups firing, and a lot of hinge movement at the hip. And I don't know, I always feel like I got a good whole body workout afterwards.
Yeah, that's great. So we kind of brought this up too when we were talking beforehand about training for Ultraskate. And some of the training, like we saw some other people do, and what we did, kind of came to the conclusion that sometimes it doesn't like matter how many miles you skate. It's something Jeremiah pointed out. Like he only skated, he said I forget what it was. It was a really small number of miles when he did 250 in 2024. And like this year, he didn't really skate that much either. You mentioned Jake, who you already talked about, didn't train a bunch, but still did over 200 miles, right? So like for me in the past, I've been kind of hung up on like, oh, I didn't train this year, so I'm not going to do well or whatever. But there's so much more to it. Like, did you eat enough food was one of them, which is not something you can, that takes into account how many miles you skated,
Right.
So I think it goes both ways, right? You skate every day, you're going to be in much better shape for ultra, but it's not necessary. What was your training like? Like, did you have to do a ton, or?
I do a ton. Back to your point that there's only like one of these a year. I feel like I want to make it count. So I feel like I have to do the training, or I'm sort of wasting an opportunity, and I don't want to project that on anyone else.
No, it's valid. It's valid.
Everyone has their own Ultraskate, but I enjoy the journey of training rather than the event itself. It's really fun to see skaters and hang out socially and kind of push yourself. But it's a slog, like 24 hours. It's really hard on my body, and I don't really love that part of it. I'd be just as happy with a 12-hour Ultraskate or I think I'd have probably a better time. But I love the fact that I'm in the best shape I could ever be in February, much better shape than I would ever be if I didn't sign up for Ultraskate. So I love how it forces me to get into shape at a time of year when I would be not very active. So, and that was true when I was a runner. It was always more interesting to me to train than to actually run the race.
That's
And
cool.
I don't know that everyone has a different experience with that, but that's how I approach it. And also, as I get older, I don't have the same endurance I had when I was 20 or 30. I can feel it, and so if I want to not suffer as much, I feel like I've got to put in the aerobic work ahead of time. I'm curious. It would be interesting for me to just show up untrained. I'd like to think I could get 100 miles, but then there's always the unknown factor. Like it may just not be your day. It may be terrible weather. You might get an illness like the day before, or stomach bug, and then you just have to put all those goals out the window. So there's so many factors. It's hard to be hard on yourself if you don't perform to a certain degree.
Yeah, and then there's kind of that regrettability part, right? Which we obviously, like you said, don't want to project it, but you get to Ultraskate, the weather's perfect, and you feel great, or you're not sick, right? You didn't come down with anything, but you didn't train. You're like, oh shit, like did I blow this opportunity?
So I haven't put myself in that situation yet, and maybe there'll be a year that comes. And one of these years, I really just want to go and have fun and maybe not do any training. But I also feel like it's good for me in so many ways to stay in shape, and I'm not willing to let myself go and not train that much. But yeah, so I've done 3 years in a row. The first year I felt like I underperformed, and last year I felt like I kind of overperformed for my training, and this year I felt like it kind of hit the mark.
Mm.
But I imagine there's a lot of randomness to it, and I just want to remove the randomness of the train. Like I knew at least like I can check the box, I did the training. But for me, training is a lot of cross training, a lot of elliptical indoor training. When it gets too cold, I don't like doing multi-hour rides outside, but I do them. I just don't like them.
Yeah, yeah. I'm always so jealous of Mark Harris. He's done the
Oh,
1 mile a
sure.
day for 2025, and some of the clips of his quick rides are just like, oh, here's a trail and there's no snow. Oh, what? Like
Yeah,
it blows my
right.
mind, right? And very jealous of stuff like that. I think it's hard to get the really long rides in the winter, like you're saying, though. So like training and focusing on like hours on the board can sometimes just be tricky to even like plan out.
I think you have to be flexible, because if you have it in your head, you're going to ride 4 hours and then it snows a foot, like you're not going to be able to ride. So you either have to say, oh, I'll go a different day, or I'm going to skip it altogether and ride next week. Or what I would do, I'd go and do 2 hours on the elliptical, but that's not for everybody. I enjoyed it in the sense that, like, okay, I felt like I did the work and checked the box, and then I could feel like I was staying on track. But I
Mm-hmm.
recognize that's not for everybody.
I think the years I felt the most trained up were the years where I put myself in the positions of like it could be like a lot of night skates. And I have a place down by the beach. It's like a mile and a half of road. There's no trail, but it's a road that's pretty quiet, and you can skate at night with a bunch of lights on. And people drive really slow, so you never get you're not likely to get hit or anything like that. And but those days suck, like I'll get done with work, you got to eat and then go for a ride. You might go for a ride by like 6 p.m., but it feels like it's already nighttime and you should be sleeping, right?
Yeah.
How winter comes along, you just want to hibernate. And those moments of like having to skate 16 miles feeling like that got me so much more trained up, because it'd be like just miserable.
Mm-hmm.
So that when it's miserable at ultra, you're like, oh, this isn't as bad, like you're just more used to it, or like the beginning is a lot easier. You're just a little more hardened, right? And I
That's right.
think there's a lot to say for that. So like dealing with it, being like, oh, I'll go on the elliptical even though I don't enjoy it, or
Mm.
I'll go trudge through the snow even though it's not fun, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. It's as much you're doing the mental practice than the physical, I think.
right. Yeah,
I
exactly.
thought your interview with Jeremiah was interesting because he does so much strength training, probably in place of the aerobic training on the road or the
Hmm.
trail, and it works for him. And I love hearing what other people do because I don't always talk about that stuff. But it's clear to me that there's so many different ways you can accomplish your goals. That's one of the things that's pretty cool about it, just figuring out what your method is that works the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Jeremiah had some great stuff to say with the strength training being sort of his place, what he does in place for more aerobic activity. And like, I learned a ton from that. And I was like, oh, damn, it doesn't necessarily take that much time to do it every day.
It's the consistency, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Being consistent even when you don't feel like it. That's why I like Mark Harris's streak. I'm not one that could get on the board if it's pouring. I would last like a week, but I think it makes you a better skater, like the more times you get on the deck. And I think it builds on itself, and there's lessons to be learned from that, I think.
I haven't been on the board, I think, since Ultra, to be honest. I've been really like, yeah, I've gone like for walks and stuff and like to the woods, to the trail. Yeah, I haven't I just set up my board. So yeah, I definitely haven't ridden any at all. I saw you were like back out at, 2 days later. Just
well, I had my legs refreshed. Yeah. I couldn't feel anything. My toes are still numb like a month later, but I felt like I had the legs. And so and my hip was feeling better. So I wanted to try pushing a bit. So yeah, I was right back riding. And then of course I think I had a cold because my body was worn down, and that sort of put me in my place and
yep.
knocked me back. And I went with that. I'm not like too stubborn when I get sick, but that was my body telling me not so fast. Like you're not recovered by a long shot.
Yeah, I got a little sick too after I got home, and like a week later. But it was kind of
for me it was a couple weeks even later, but it still caught up with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really easy to underestimate when you're like, oh, I feel fine. What do you mean?
Yeah,
but it's just like it's coming. You just wait. Like,
no, you can only fool yourself for so long, and then reality catches up, I think.
So yeah, training, is what it is for everyone is different, right? We discussed a little bit about the weather. It was sunny, right? But it wasn't. It was like overcast.
There were just enough clouds. I used to. I felt like at least maybe two years ago, it was really. I felt hot to me and muggy. And I felt this year was more comfortable, and there were just enough clouds that like it didn't feel like we were baking constantly.
Yeah, it wasn't a constant bake. Like some years it is, and you're just like, when is this sun going away?
Right.
But like I put sunscreen on, but I didn't get sunburn. Like usually I put sunscreen on and I do get sunburn. At some point I just forget, just because like you're saying, like it can be relentless. You're just on this blacktop for
oh gosh,
freaking 8 hours in the sun. It just it eats you alive. But this year it wasn't nearly as bad, and
I think it got cool at night, didn't it? It felt nice and cool.
Yeah, I saw Lena mentioned in her post, she said she was like getting sleepy at night and then put on like a long sleeve, and it woke her up because she was just getting cold, and the cold was kind of like making her tired, right? But if you put on, I never thought about that, like put on a layer to wake yourself up. It's actually kind of cool.
It makes a lot of sense now. At 2 a.m. when I was sitting there taking a break and shivering, it never occurred to me to put on a top. Like, but it motivated me. I was like, I can either sit here and shiver or I can get to riding again. So as long as I was moving, I was pretty comfortable. But every time I stopped, I felt cold.
I always bring my Insanity Board Shop zip up sweatshirt. It's my lucky.
I subscribe to the thought. Someone told me this tip and I went with it. Like, don't set up a tent or roll out a bedroll or even keep yourself as uncomfortable as possible so you don't have the option to stop if you really don't want to stop. So I think that applies maybe to clothing as well. But I think if I put on a nice warm top, I'd have just sat in that chair for too long.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point to make. Like, how much do you want to pamper yourself? You want to have a cot ready to go? Like, some years you kind of need, like, you might need one, right? Like, both Miguel and my brother in 2024 were like took naps on a cot, and and they put up a ton of miles, over 200, 250. If you're the type of person who can just like take a 30-minute nap and get back out there, maybe it's good. But if you will be too tempted, then maybe it's not. I think with sweatshirts or like some sort of like long sleeve workout jersey, so you could be handed it and then you just throw it on while you're out there, so you don't even get to sit in the chair and get cozy.
I'll have one ready for next year. That's what I learned.
Nice. Yeah, it gets cold even though it's like super hot in the day. It definitely chills down, and the temperature change alone will kind of get to you. Good to have that stuff. And we had good tailwind. We already mentioned that kind of, but that was a really nice treat. Only a little bit of headwind on the other side. Like you definitely didn't get like in past years, it's like worse on the headwind side. You don't like get as much out of the tailwind as you lose out of the headwind. But this year it was the opposite, in my opinion.
Yeah, I felt the hardest thing was turn one because of the pavement transition, but also paddling, and it's a little bit like up a hill, like not a hill, but like a slight rise, and then we had a headwind right there. Turn one was hard in the middle of the day when the wind was the strongest. I thought. I don't know if you felt
Yeah,
it as much
definitely was.
pushing.
Definitely was. I can't imagine on just the paddle. That would have been rough.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
I think that would be brutal anyway, but like with a headwind, I don't know. You have these intrusive thoughts like I'm just going to put my foot down and push like two pushes, But I didn't. But that's a tough stretch. Every lap you had to like get through that, and then it was easy. Like once you got through that turn, the rest of the lap was pretty pleasant. I thought.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Getting out of that pit row, it's just like kind of choppy. Like right away, it gets real choppy, and then it kind of mellows out. But like,
Yeah.
it's pretty much choppy up that whole incline and around the
And then
turn.
everyone sort of has their own idea, like what's the best line to take.
Yeah, yeah.
Cut hard right and then get on the line, or do you wait till the last minute and then cut over? Because there's kind of like a little rise in the
Uh-huh.
in the track, the way it breaks, and it just I don't know. There's got to be like a best way to do it, but I'm not sure I know.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that because like, there's hundreds of people who have done hundreds of laps on that track.
Right.
And I don't know if it's like talked about enough, like what the optimal line is. And
That's why I brought it up. I don't know.
yeah, there's like a couple points, right? Like that one coming out of pit row. I think, obviously you want to be as tight to the turn in theory as possible. It's tight to like the inside of the track. So like coming up
Right.
pit row, you want to be all the way on the left, but you do have to cut over to get on that turn. So is it easier to cut over early? And then maybe your turn is a little wider, but it's not as much incline.
Right. I feel like there's enough camber to the track there to get over a lip that might be why people head hard right
Yeah,
early.
because I saw Jared doing that. Like he was cutting over like right away a couple times at least on his laps.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh damn, should I be doing that? Because I'm always like kind of like a straight shot from the pit row to that cone where it turns, and there's just like so much gnarly pavement there, and it does feel like mostly uphill. And then after that turn, there's like Joe was taking the line where you hug the inside,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like what all the inliners do as well. And then you take that whole back stretch on the inside, really close to the wall. Again, you have to kind of come out a little bit. So like, where's the best point to come out? For me, I wasn't even taking the inside line. I was just going straight.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I don't know which one's better because, as you probably noticed, the pavement changes. There's like a point where the pavement changes and it gets nice.
It's almost nice,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah, it's like nice for a lot of the backstretch, but right before it, it's not. And there's like a couple weird lines you can take where you're on more choppy pavement than you need to be. Definitely something fun to talk about, but kind of like nitty gritty, like
Sure,
technical
no answer,
stuff.
but that's the kind of stuff I think I start to think about in those early morning, like overnight hours when you're like, I don't know how to get the next miles done. Like you just sort of think, well, maybe this time I'll check out the pavement a little to the left or the right. And it gives you something slightly different to do on that particular lap, I think.
Yeah, compare that to like the Dutch track where it's just all smooth. The nuance is in the turning because there's more turns, and there is like one incline that's more inclined than anything on Miami. It's not like super hill, but like it's something to take into your account, like while you're doing 100 of these laps, right? So it's definitely fun to like compare tracks as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned 6 hour or a 12-hour Ultraskate. I did the 6 hour in the Dutch, and that was one of the most fun races I've been to. And like as far as like stress goes, you know, with like a 24-hour being kind of stressful, but really just like a huge undertaking in terms of preparation and then follow up, right? Like, oh, you didn't sleep for 24 hours. Now you have to sleep for a whole night extra, sleep somehow. And the next, you know, you went back home right away. I don't know how you did that, but like, you know, like 24 hours is like a 3-day thing. Whereas a 6-hour Ultraskate is you wake up early, you're done by the afternoon, and you're back in bed that night, right? So like, and still is a really fun test of endurance. We'd love to see more 6 hour.
6 hours is still a lot of athletic endurance.
Yeah.
Long time by any measure to really.
You can still really push yourself too, and like it's a lot of time, you know. Which reminds me, like I kind of took some notes on my plane back, and one of the sections of the notes was like hours 1 through 4, okay, started to hurt, you know, 4 or 5. Hours 6 through 10, terrible. Like just always so brutal. It's like they're always like this, but I always forget. How bad that is.
I think those are the hardest hours.
They are physically, right? Yeah. Like that's where it like the pain kind of like plateaus. The experience kind of just plateaus. You're just like, all right, this is it. This is what I'm dealing with for a while.
Right.
And you know, it ebbs and flows, gets better, gets worse, whatever. But like those hours are so brutal.
Absolutely. If I decide to nap one of these times, I'm going to nap during that.
Dude, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
It's not a bad idea. I napped from it was like noon or something. 5 hours in, 6 hours in. So, and the race started at 8. So no, it was like 2.
Yeah.
And then I slept till like 5, 6.
Yeah.
And went back out and skated the whole night, you know? So like you can do that. Like we were saying, like just take it easy at the beginning. You can always skate faster later.
One of these years I'll take that advice. Although
it's hard. It's really hard to do.
Hard. I think if it was really like, let's say it was 90 degrees, that's the time I would probably actually heed that advice.
Mm-hmm. And that's what it was for me. It was 90 degrees.
It wasn't so bad this year, I thought. And then of course, when you get into like 3 or 4, you're like, well, it's not too long until the sun sets. And that's like, to me, it's psychologically an uplifting time, just knowing that it's going to cool off. The winds are going down. Like that's the time that I feel like you can make up for some of how lousy you feel in the heat of the day.
And then eventually you just get sick of the nighttime. You're like, when's the sun coming back?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It's usually like 20 minutes after the sun goes down. I'm like, okay, well, why was I looking forward to this? This is going to be a long night.
Yep.
So to your point, I think we could do more shorter, but still long enough endurance events. I'd love to see a fall 12-hour Ultraskate. And Kurt and I have talked a little bit about trying to put something together someday, but he has a track in mind in Baltimore where they're repaving this sinkhole that seems to be taking forever. But I'll just put that out there because it'll keep us honest that we keep looking into that.
Yeah, no, I remember you mentioned that. I'm definitely interested.
I think it'd be nice to do an event where you could train in the spring and summer and maybe early fall and, enjoy that a little bit more than the training in the winter, which I think feels like drudgery a lot of the time.
Yeah, I guess while we're talking about events, there's Adams. Did you see Adams' new event he made?
Yeah, that looks super cool. It's in August, is that?
Yeah, August 8th or 9th or something. And it's like a weekend long thing, doing like a rally race style. There's some notes really cool if you check out on Instagram, Blue Ridge Project.
I think that's really cool. I think we need more things like that that are fun and can be, races if you want them to be, but you could, that's the sort of thing I think you could show up and just enjoy the experience and not stress over the racing part.
Uh-huh. Which brings to mind another event, which I'm pretty sure you're signed up for, which is Chief Ladiga.
I'm signed up for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I
We'll
saw
see
that.
if
I
I
was like, oh,
follow
it's
through.
coming.
I've been, I've done a little bit of the logistics, but yeah, I'm not going to race that. I'm pretty sure I'm just going to survive it. And the hills scare me a little bit, like not enough that I won't do it, but I am not really confident with hills. So that'll be a good thing to put myself through maybe.
Yeah, that's a fun one for sure. I'll be there again. I might be skating it, but I might be supporting depending on the situation.
Uh-huh.
And it's definitely not one to race. Like you really don't need to race that one. Some people do, obviously, but even the people who are at the top are like, I just want to finish this fucking thing. Like, like it gets to a point where it's like, I don't care what anyone else is doing. But it's looking like a pretty small turnout right now.
Looks like that so far, but there's still time. Hopefully,
yeah, small turnout's fine too. It's still a good group of people.
And I see they're having the amazing race again on Kelly's Island.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that. Kurt was telling me about it at Ultra too.
That was really fun, and it's a kind of a camping experience on a island that it does have cars, but it's more like golf cart friendly, and there's lots of just really scenic roads, and a lot of times you're riding along the road right on the edge of the island, so you get water views everywhere.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's a fun place to explore and just kind of get away for a weekend. And there's a scavenger hunt component that is kind of unique. It's just really fun event right in the middle of the summer, I think.
And that's Kelly's Island. Where is that again?
In Ohio. I should know better, but Kurt did most of the driving out there, so I don't remember exactly where but you basically take a ferry from I think it's Sandusky, Ohio, near where Cedar Point is.
What body of water is it on?
Well, it's one of the Great Lakes. You had to ask me that.
I'm looking it up right now.
I'm going to show my typical American poor knowledge of geography.
It is in Lake Erie.
Lake Erie.
And
as I said.
Yeah, no, that's really cool.
So it's a short ferry ride, and it maybe runs every hour or so. And I think we took his car across and then parked at the campground there. But once you park, that's it. You don't have to get in your car again, and you can ride your board anywhere.
Like a pretty small island where you could skate the whole thing and wouldn't take you that long. Or it would be I don't know how many miles, but
it takes you a while if you get lost during the scavenger hunt, like I did, and probably most people did. So I managed to skate 20 plus miles all over that little island when in theory you shouldn't be able to skate more than 10 and see the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of backtracking, but I think that is a fun event. And if you have a chance to get there, it's not the easiest place to get to, but it's well worth it once you're there.
Yeah, it does seem like a really good one. It's nice to have stuff everywhere too, right?
Yeah.
It's Midwest, right? There's my friend Al. I don't know if you know Al Copus. He's doing Push in the Gorge, which is in Pacific Northwest area. I think it's in Oregon. So bringing back some of that, but it's not really anything in California. I'm looking at a map right now, so I'm just yeah, there's not much. There used to be a few things in Texas. I know Aaron put together an event not too long ago.
Oh, and there's going to be a marathon in Ohio.
Oh, really?
The date escapes me. Franco Vitella and someone else are organizing that.
Oh,
and,
wow.
I wish I had the date in front of me, but that's one to look into also.
Nice. Miles Kipper is trying to get interest in a Minnesota event. I know all kinds of stuff. Very exciting.
Very exciting.
Get some more events on the calendar. Speaking of which, we had a few cool things happen this year. It's probably the last few things we can talk about for the event, but we can't really talk about this event without mentioning them, and that is world record from Joe Mazzone, which a lot of people probably listening to this probably know about. Total mileage was 320.3, 217 laps on the track, and he finished. I'm looking at the results. He finished with 4.5 minutes to go, so like almost enough time to do one more.
Oh, it's amazing.
But he would have had to go even faster than he already was, which he was really, really cruising. That was so cool to see, right? Like you just come flying by,
Yeah.
cruising. He was in the zone, That was fun.
To me, it's like he makes it look so easy that you don't always appreciate how incredibly challenging that must be for so long, 24 hours on your feet. It's almost like machine-like how efficient he is. And it's hard, but your brain sees like this is pretty effortless. And
it's fun. It's actually a really funny thing to point out that I never really
it's kind of
articulated.
Obvious, but it's like I have to remind myself, like he's doing this superhuman thing because he makes it look so like doable, right?
Yeah, he does make it look extremely like effortless, and it almost is like, oh yeah, well it's not hard for him, right? But it's like, yeah, but that's the point. Like he's put himself in a position where it's not. It is. I'm assuming very difficult even for him. Can't like downplay his achievement, but yeah, he makes it look so easy.
Yeah.
it is so and like so awesome. I would love to get to a point where I even looked that good. I don't need to go that fast, but like if I could look that good for 24 hours.
I'll set that goal to you. I know I've given up on that long ago. I just
well, like I said, I don't need to go that fast. I just need to look that good.
I aspire to looking, to mediocrity, to sort of approaching competence in appearance.
Yeah, that's a great thing to strive for too. I mean, which makes me think of another thing. I'm not going to call these people out by name, but there were a few of my friends out there who were moving faster than me, right? So they'd come up behind me and be like, "Oh, so and so's right here. Like, see how they're doing." I just look at their face, and it's just like all life is gone. They're just like so like broken. It's like, oh shit, like they're having a hard time right now.
So here's my question: what do you say to them? Like, because if you say good job, you're looking like you're lying.
Like, I mean, you can say good job.
Ignore the situation.
I always just lie to them. I say, you look great, looking great.
I generally lie too, but I don't necessarily want someone to tell me I'm looking great when I know I look like garbage. But
yeah, no, it's a great point because like sometimes, especially if it's like my brother or someone I'm really close with, they'll be like, "Yeah, I don't feel good." I feel like shit. It's like. It's like, oh, you look great still, or whatever.
Better to say something. I agree with that, right? And let someone, if you're not feeling well and you're not looking good, and but better to get a word of encouragement, I think. And sometimes you'll talk. I've noticed sometimes I'll be really out of energy and I'll talk to someone and then it'll lift me up. And you never know when that's going to happen. So you got to be open to the possibility, I think.
Yeah. Like I made some new friends at like hour 10 or 11 or something. And that was awesome. Like skating with new people and just like chatting with them, getting to know them with what energy you have. Like when you have it, sometimes it's good to spend it on that just to, because if they're in an okay spot, it kind of reciprocates, right? And you kind of like
sure. It's like good vibes, encourage more good vibes, and
and before you know it, you skated 3 laps or whatever, and it's like
that's right. One lap at a time.
Exactly. Yeah, like I had some good conversations with Kurt. I remember we skated a couple laps together with a few other people, and that was really fun. Travis and Lynn Paul were paired up the whole time. Every time I saw them, I was like, oh, I'm going to ride with these guys for a bit. And that was really fun. But yeah, like the people who just look completely shot and then they come back around again and pass you, it's like, oh, they must be feeling better now. And sometimes it's still just like, no, like not happening. And it's impressive though, right? Like I was really impressed by some of those folks who like I was like, oh, you're done any second now. And then sure
Right.
enough,
Just keep
they
going.
lasted longer than I did, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's always really impressive to see how far people are pushing themselves, and when they can't hide it too. It's like on display. Really fun to look back on.
Yeah, there's a vulnerability to it. I mean, you're never more vulnerable than you are in those early morning hours, just like laying it all out on the track. And I think that's what a lot of us love about it. Honest.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. It's like pure. So yeah, Joe world record 320.3, and then Lena Merringdahl new women's record, course record 258.3, which is like I think 6 miles ish shy of her world record. So another crazy performance there. Tied for third place overall. So yeah, we had Lena on the podcast recently, and she was, had a lot of great info. I think for Ultraskate, but also just about general stuff. Would be cool to see what she does next. In her recent post, she did mention maybe going for 300, which would be
Yeah.
tremendous. Saw a lot of people actually. There was, let's see, I'm looking at the stats again. There were 7 total people 250 plus, including Joe at 300 plus, which is the most it's been in a while. And I saw a post from a lot of those people and talking with some of them, and they're like, "Yeah, I think 300's next." So it could be a
Yeah.
big pack going for 300 next year.
More
really
power
awesome.
to them.
Yeah, no, I'll be there watching.
I think Lena's got it in her, but
I think so too.
she seems to be, well, your podcast with her, that was one of my favorite ones, and you've had some great ones, but just the insight into how she makes decisions like designing her gear, and then how she sort of adjusts her approach to things based on what she learns. She seems to be really quick learning, right? It takes some of us a few times to make the same mistakes over and over again, but I feel like she has a very rapid pace of learning, and she's so young. I mean, got a lot of years of before your endurance really even peaks. So I don't know. I wouldn't bet against her hitting 300.
Definitely. Yeah. That'll be really fun to watch.
Jared, I mean, gosh, he's what, at 259, 260 almost?
Yeah, 259.78 is what it came out. So basically 260. I mean,
he's 20 years old. He's a baby.
Yeah.
He's got so much potential ahead of him. Not to make it about age, but I look at one thing I noticed, like the paddlers skew older. We tend to be an older bunch, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because, like me, they kind of figure out, hey, here's another way I can propel myself and take the load off my legs. But most of the straight pushers are just generally younger. We don't have a huge number of riders to analyze, but I thought that was sort of interesting.
No, that's really cool, actually, because skate paddle, like you said, limited sample size, but still, there's definitely more older skaters in that bracket or in that discipline.
But back to Lena, I had kind of a front row seat because I set up my stuff, and my wife was helping to support her during the day, at least. And it was fun to see her and Viola skate together, and they do a lot of pumping, which I think is
they really do
a bit unique, at least for Ultraskate Miami track. I'm not sure what it's like in the Netherlands, but I don't know. They seem to bring so much energy and excitement, and that was just really cool to get a front row seat on and see them just having a good time while they're just killing it.
Yeah, yeah. The horn, that she has on her helmet is always fun. Yeah, they have really good like track vibes, like we were talking about, and I think that goes a long way, even for like your own performance, right? Because if people associate that with you, then they're more likely to send you those same vibes.
Sure, yeah. And it becomes a positive feedback loop. And you see Travis, and he gets all excited and says hi, and then you say hi to him, and it spreads. I think I don't know. I've only done this 3 years, but I felt like some of the newcomers we had this year just brought a lot of energy, just a lot of excitement, like right off the bat, and people sort of comfortable just showing up and and feeding off of that enthusiasm and sharing their own. I think that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, yeah, and like Jeremiah and I have talked. We've had two podcasts, and both of them we mentioned like, oh, the wave's coming. We talk about the wave,
Yeah,
and you really saw it this year. Like you mentioned newcomers, but also like older, not older, but like people who used to skate coming back, and just like Joe kind of being one of them, right? Like
yeah,
where he hadn't
yeah,
done an ultra in a while, and just the performance level too is really showing that like we're kind of we're trending upward. I feel like in terms of just everything, participation, performance, and the general community development. I feel like is really good right now. So yeah, it was definitely pretty evident this year. There's been like other ultra skates where it felt not, I don't know what the word to use is, not segregated, but like
hmm,
people were kind of just in their own worlds, right? And it was less not less community, because the community's always been there. It's always been a great positive experience. Everyone's always been really awesome. Some years just feel more like tight than others. I don't know how to explain it, but this year
hmm,
definitely felt like one of the tightest community wise, and like a lot of people knew each other, kind of thing, and the people
yeah,
who were new had a reason for coming, where like that kind of put them in a position to like make new friends or connect with people they already knew that they just had, maybe people they met online, right? There's a lot of that in our community. So really cool to see, really big representation, like country wise too. I don't know if you saw that.
yeah, yeah. It just seemed like a nice mixture of people, and some new people, some returning veterans that maybe had been gone for a while, and just good positive energy. And for someone like me, I feel like the first year was sort of overwhelming, and I'm kind of quiet and an introvert, and it just I was overwhelmed when I showed up there
Yeah.
the first year. And so I feel like it takes, at least it took me a couple years to recognize, like, all right, like now I know some people and I want to build on that and meet some new people. And I know there's not a lot of time. So I just got to put myself out there and, make an effort more. And maybe some people just sort of figure that out immediately, and they show up and they're like ready to roll, and
Right.
bring a lot of energy that I didn't have. Like it took me a while to figure out that it's almost like what you put into it, it gets returned to you many fold. As far as cheering people on and getting to know people. I think that's the most fun part of the experience for me. But doesn't always come easily to someone like me.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. Like sometimes it's hard to just put yourself out there, but it does get easier when you're all doing the same thing. It's like, oh, we're all
Yeah,
here to ride 24 hours on a skateboard. Like we have something in common, you know?
that's right. And once
And
you've been there a couple of times, then you see the familiar faces, and you're it's not so overwhelming trying to meet new people, I think.
yeah, for sure. So we mentioned, I do want to talk about this real quick because I think it's really important. Is we mentioned Travis Upshur and Lynn Paul. They were both really awesome on the track, really good vibes. And Travis in particular is really like super positive force. He's the loudest voice at hour 12, right? Like
Sure.
we passed through the gate together at hour 12. He's like 12 hours in. It's like, dude, how do you have energy right now? And like he was the whole time I saw him. He's like, I feel great. I feel fine. I'm just gonna keep skating. I'm not gonna sleep. I'm just gonna keep skating.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
skated the whole 24. He had this great energy. And we had a new award this year, which I'm sure a lot of people know about, which is the Jeff Crow Spirit Award, given to someone who kind of embodies Jeff's spirit. If anyone ever met Jeff Crow, they know just how awesome he was and how important the skate community was to him. So Travis got that award, which I think was well deserved, and is a really cool sort of cherry on the top of that discussion we were just having about the community, and like shows just how powerful it is, and how I know Travis was really touched by that, and really enjoyed getting that award, and it meant a lot to him. So to see like the impact we have on each other is really cool.
Absolutely. I thought, like, from a spectator standpoint at the award ceremony, that was like the highlight of the whole award ceremony, if not the whole event. Just
Yeah.
seeing it was moving, it was touching, and it was well deserved. And I think everyone sort of recognized that immediately.
Mm-hmm. So I would love to see if that becomes like a normal, an annual thing. I'm not sure if it will, but if it is, that's really cool, and honoring things like that, right? That kind of go beyond the performance and highlight these other elements of the event that are like just as important, right? Would be cool to see. You had a bunch of ideas actually for, like, new riders, right? First time performance, like recognizing these things. Obviously, with all the awards we already have, it's really tricky to like enumerate all these possible things and have time for them at a ceremony, but maybe there's like another avenue to go about, like
Yeah,
recognizing
I
these people.
I think there's other ways to maybe get some of that recognition out there without adding on to what's already sort of a long award ceremony when everyone's pretty tired. And you don't want to burden the organizers with having to select something that becomes, fairly subjective. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think, as you had mentioned, that could maybe be crowdsourced a little bit, or maybe online. Maybe it may be some type of voting. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're tools that we have, electronic tools that could make it fairly easy to sort. But I think that would be fun. Whether it's recognizing a certain style, who has the best style on the track, or there were so many. I looked through, like, there's so many awesome performances by newcomers. Like, I don't even know how you pick one.
Yeah, that'd be tricky.
But you could list a bunch of people, maybe.
Yeah, like finding out if it's their first time might be kind of hard, right? But if there was
Yeah.
like a box they could check or something, like that'd be really cool. I think recognizing first time performances is a big deal, because some people show up and it's like the first time they've ridden more than 40 miles, and they do something like crazy, like 200,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Adam's first time, I think he did like 290, right? So sometimes people really, really blow it out of the water, right? And it'd be
Yeah.
really cool to see what those stats are like, even.
Yeah.
And then, like Mark Harris was really cool how he came to the event and wasn't skating, but was taking photos, like, and was documenting the event really well, was supporting skaters as well. So like it'd be cool if somehow there was more of that, where it was like there'd be people who were documenting the event more, and it'd be like, oh, this support group was insane. Like they were doing so much, or like they had all this stuff, developing more of a story. I think that'd be awesome. But it's hard, right? Like, there's so much that goes on. There's so much to do, and like, we were fortunate enough to have people like Mark or otherwise who were deciding to do that. Just took it upon themselves. It's a big undertaking.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes the fact that we're in this closed course, it makes it harder to have, like, spontaneous support from a community. So it takes someone like Mark showing up that, like, I'm going to drive to the track and not ride my normal number of miles, and really invest in doing it. But we don't have the organic support of just like being in a town, right?
Right.
We're at a closed track. And I think a lot of other endurance races lean into a community to provide that support. And we haven't. I'm not saying there's a solution to it. I'm just acknowledging that it's that much harder, or, to have a lot of purposeful support.
Totally. There was one other thing I kind of wanted to touch on from this year that was new for this year, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on it, if you'd like to talk about it, which is the remeasuring of the track.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like, it ended up being 1.475 or 05. I forget what it was exactly, but it ends up being like a hundredth of a mile, or like 0.015 miles longer per lap, which adds up, right? When you're doing 200 of them, like Joe was, right? 200 times 0.015 is 3 miles. And to put it in perspective, right? Like the 200-mile lap, which was always 137, is now 136. So it's interesting, right? Because it means everyone's technically skated far, or by the new measurement has skated farther than they think in past years,
Mhm.
which is great, which is cool. Like, oh, sweet, like extra miles. But if it were the opposite, right? Like, would that mean people didn't skate as far? Like, people didn't earn their 200 club, whatever. Like, I think remeasuring the track is a big deal. I'm not opposed to what they did or whatever. I don't really have an opinion that way. I think it's interesting to look at and see like just
Mhm.
how much of a difference it makes, that small amount, right?
Did it apply to this year? Do you know? Or
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
so this year was the first year with the new
yeah.
measure.
Yeah, so like people got 200 miles for at 136. It used to be like 201, like right at 200. Now it's
Yeah.
274,
Huh.
and one
Yeah.
lap shorter.
I think the way you reframed it, like, does it mean any less of the accomplishments if it had measured lower? Do we then like discount some of the previous? I think that's not something I would want to get into.
Sure. Yeah.
And when we talk about, say, turn one and what the best line to take is, like, I don't think anyone really knows exactly
Yeah.
how long these tracks. I mean, I'm sure they have like the most robust method possible to measure it, but I'm sure you'd have to kind of like, there's a little bit of subjectivity to it. It seems really darn close if that's the new measurement in the grand scheme of things. I don't think it makes a huge difference, but it's important to be as accurate as possible. And
Mhm.
I think maybe just I wouldn't want to recalculate in a downward fashion some of the old.
Yeah. Yeah, like do we remeasure it every so often just to make sure? But yeah, that's not really that important, right? The important thing
Mhm.
is that you like maybe just counting the laps is better. And
Maybe,
like that's the
maybe.
way people should go about like handling their past performances versus their current ones, right? Which I think is what Joe did, right? He was very, very adamant about doing more laps than he did last
Ah,
year
yeah,
so
yeah.
that he didn't get tricked into like, oh, I did the record, but I didn't do as many laps, right? Like, but he surpassed it, I think, by 3. He surpassed
Well,
it.
that's
Or
the
2 at least.
record mindset that you need, right? To like, that's the right mindset to have. All you can control is how many. Like, can you do one more lap, two more laps? Not you can't control how long the course measures.
Yeah, and it's just like that small, right? Because we do so many laps, right? If it were bigger, if it was a bigger lap, it would
Hmm.
be have less of an effect, right?
Hmm.
Which I think is something some people have brought up. Like, what if it was just like huge laps, like 20-mile laps, right, or whatever? And then how would you count the mile? Like, would you only count laps again still, or would you let people with GPS? Like,
Sure. Right.
like how accurate is GPS? Maybe like in a straight line, it's better
Yeah.
than the circles we do, right? I don't know. I'm happy that they're doing things like remeasuring and like taking all that seriously. I think that's great.
Well, in your 20-mile lap example, can you imagine saying, "Well, I do one more lap, but that's going to take me 2 hours." I
Yeah, like 20-mile laps
don't think
sounds
it's worth it.
brutal. It sounds really brutal. Like you have to bring a backpack every time almost. Which I don't like wearing a backpack. But yeah, that was something I kind of wanted to touch on just cuz it's new, right? It was new this year. It seems worth mentioning, but I'm happy with the results. I get more and more
Yeah, maybe
miles.
it was fortunate it measured long, and if
Yeah,
it
yeah.
it would be a less pleasant conversation.
I remember like being out there and being like, "Wait, did it?" Because I remember Scott mentioning on the loudspeaker, like I didn't hear it all though. I was like, "Oh, did it measure longer or shorter?" And like, not something you want to be thinking about like 16 hours in. Like,
Right.
I thought I only had this many laps to go, but it's like 137 is like burned in my brain. I'm like, that's how many laps I need. That's how many. But now it's less. So it's like, okay, this is good. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to mention? Either about the show, about the event, or about distance skateboarding, anything at all?
Well, I just want to. We touched on it earlier, but I love pumping, and I feel like it seems like, well, at least at this year's Ultraskate, there was more pumping. I occasionally get people that reach out with questions like, "How do I get started?" And I love all that stuff. So I'm happy to try to help people get started with that. Not that I feel like I'm the expert in that, but it's certainly something
No.
passionate about. And it can be a little overwhelming, like the amount of gear in our sport, and people really
Yes.
analyze like what's the optimal setup. And I don't want people to lose sight of the fact that like you can pump just about any deck, and it may not be pretty and you may not pump it well, but like don't feel like you have to chase this optimal setup, especially like starting out. So if people want suggestions for like setups they can pump, I think I'm happy to share any of that information. And I love when I see that. I love seeing more people out there pumping.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for offering yourself as a resource there. I think that's tremendous. I think you're a great resource for it, being that you started pumping and you mostly pump, so that's kind of your thing. I would point people in your direction, honestly. So I wouldn't downplay the knowledge you have.
Well, I have more than nothing, but there are always better people pumping. But maybe I have more time to suggest things.
No, yeah, I think especially the gear stuff. If you tried out a bunch of different stuff, a bunch of different things, helping someone save a little money or just time and the headache of having to choose, like, oh, am I going to choose the wrong thing? I don't know what bushings are. Like, what does that mean? Like, how do you pump, right? Like, how does that even work?
Yeah. I'm proof that anyone can pump, even those that have never been on a board before and never got the hang of skateboarding as a kid. Like, if I can do it, absolutely anyone can.
It is a fun thing too, like, not to get too off in the weeds, but like when you finally get to that point where you're conserving momentum and you're like, you've pumped for the past mile and you're still moving, right? Like, because I think when you first learn, it's like you wiggle and you kind of lose speed.
Sure.
And then it dies out maybe if you kind of lose your momentum, but like then you get to a level at it where it's like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah. When it finally clicks that you can actually convince yourself you're accelerating and not just, hanging on and maybe slowing down a little bit, but like you're actually driving the board forward. You're pumping. That's the coolest feeling. And to me, like I'm not a speed demon. I don't think I'm cut out for downhill. But there's no better feeling for me than like pumping at like the fastest I can pump and just sort of holding on and trying to go as long as I can without putting the foot down. That's to me like the purest, most fun form of longboarding that I can achieve.
Well, speaking of hills and pumping, I guess next question I was going to ask is where will we see you next, which is Chief Ladiga is your next event, right?
Yeah, I think that's it. I have pipe dreams of riding the Dutch Ultraskate. It's just I'm not sure if I can make it happen this year. But that's on my big A adventure bucket list.
Yeah, so. Yeah. Let's do some. Let's go. Let's go next year. I'm going to go next year, 2026. I'll see you there.
All right.
Well, you don't have to. You can go this year too if you want, but we'll go. We'll make sure we go next year.
Right. Seems like the kind of thing it'd be fun to do as many times as possible. But first one is what I got to start with.
Yeah, you can do a little Euro trip. like see Amsterdam and travel around Europe even a little bit with it, depending on work or whatever you're working you're up to that time.
Well, I'll pick your brain off air then, because you went last year.
Right? I went to the 6 hour. Yeah.
But like that some of the travel things it might be worth knowing.
Yeah, definitely. Love to share anything I have. I really want to go back. It was so much fun for a vacation. Amsterdam is a really, really cool city. Like, I loved being able to walk places. The weather was really nice. Track was really nice. It was a lot. It's in the summer. Like, it's not in the freaking middle of winter. It's so much better in that regard. But yeah, Ladiga, you probably will be able to pump, by the way, again, not to get too far off in the weeds, but you'll probably be able to pump a good amount of that because it's rail trail. So there's like that steady inclines either way. So maybe on the uphill it'd be a little harder. And then there's obviously the hills that are not pumpable, but I think you'll have a good time. I think that'll be really fun.
I hear there's a lot of lovely brushed concrete.
Oh yeah, of course. Of course. They didn't repave any of the brushed concrete that we know of, but they did repave essentially right at the end of the brushed concrete, which is where it meets Alabama. Georgia side, right? It's all brushed. for like 40 miles until the line, and then after the line they just repaved a bunch of it, and I think it's maybe a little wider too, which is nice. But yeah, it's an experience. It's really fun. Anyone listening who's interested, there's plenty of spots still, and we'd love to have you. I'm excited you're coming because I remember we talked about it, and you said you maybe were going to go last year, but it was hard to make it happen.
Yeah, last year was tough with my kids because they had a lot of like graduation type things or end of school year stuff, and I think I don't have that same amount of commitments this year. So
Awesome.
this seems to be the year.
Cool. And social media for people to reach out to you on, what's best?
I'm on Instagram, Eastern Shore Longboarding, I think. I don't even know.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I'm pretty sure. I always forget too, like with names like that. Like,
and I can promise good music, passable videography, and mediocre longboarding on that. But that's probably where I'm most active.
Yeah, you do great videos. You have the 360 cam, right?
I have a drone.
That's what it is. The drone footage is so good of pushing. I wish there was more of it.
It's so easy. I mean, I think I did a lot of GoPro on my skate pole, which is fun to a point, but there's something about just putting it behind you and skating and not worrying about it. It makes it easier. It's a lot. I don't know. It may get kind of old after a while, but I think from just a quick capture standpoint, it's hard to beat.
Yeah, it's really cool.
A lot of time editing.
The view from above is really good for capturing too. Like, you imagine like a race, like a fast race where people were like sprinting, and you had like a bird's eye view of that. That would look really cool.
Yeah. I'll bring it down to Ladiga and see.
Oh yeah.
I won't care about my speed, but maybe I can time it such that I can try to capture a little bit of that when I'm down there.
Dude, that would be so cool if you got footage on the drone for Ladiga, because we're trying to put together a little video for that this year. So if you had footage like that, you'd want to donate to that. That would be super cool.
Well, I'll bring it, and maybe I'll even pick up an extra battery by then, because it doesn't last real long. But as with any kind of video collection, then it's like dealing with how much footage you want to store and then transferring it. And that's where there's a balance of like perfection and like just good enough. And my goal is just to get good enough content that's at least more interesting than looking at memes, all the time that get kind of old.
Definitely. It doesn't have to be like professional quality, right?
No, and mine definitely isn't. So
it's hard to notice though, right? These days, like the tech does a lot of the work for you, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's good enough. And for me, my goal is always to, if nothing else, motivate myself to go ride again. And it accomplishes that. And if it motivates another person or two to do the same, then it's done its job.
Hell yeah. Really cool. Awesome. So, hey, thanks so much for coming on the show. This has been a really awesome conversation. Really great stuff. I think we did a fun recap of the event. There's obviously so much more that goes on in 24 hours, so it's hard to account for everything. If we missed anything, feel free to reach out to me, Skating in Circles, on Instagram, and we'll get the word out on anything else. Maybe do another show. I really appreciated your story and some of the perspective you had. So thanks again.
Well, thank you, Max. I've appreciated all of your podcasts. I've found that what I like most about your podcast is I learned something about people personally that has nothing to do with skateboarding. And
exactly.
So that for that, I'm really appreciative. And thanks for giving your guests the room to sort of be themselves and talk enough that you get to know them a little more than I would have expected from a skateboarding focused podcast. So that's kudos to you for putting this on so regularly.
Sweet. Yeah. Thank you actually for calling that out, because that was my main goal from the start, was like to show other people that like who our community is and where we come from, what makes us like slightly different. And like people have been so great at opening up on the show and then, letting a little bit of themselves in. So I can't really do without people like you coming on. So
Thanks for the opportunity. And I look forward to all the other cool guests you're going to have on after me.
Yeah, you are so welcome. The pleasure is truly mine. More to come, of course. I've got a few people I've got in mind, but yeah, if you or anyone else listening has ideas of people they want to hear from, definitely let me know, and I'll get working on that. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Max.
Take care.